At dinner, they laughed at me for being the black sheep. Tomorrow, they'll discover I run the billion-dollar company they're desperate to partner with. They never knew the truth about me. I, 29M, sat at the mahogany dining table, watching my family tear me apart with their words while they passed around the roast beef. The crystal chandelier cast shadows across their smug faces as they took turns explaining to my girlfriend why I was the family disappointment. My older brother launched into his favorite story about how I dropped out of business school to play with computers. My sister chimed in about my shabby apartment and secondhand clothes. My father, the successful real estate mogul, just shook his head in that familiar way that said everything without saying anything at all. My girlfriend squeezed my hand under the table, but I could see the doubt creeping into her eyes. She'd heard these stories before, but never with this level of detail, never with the whole family piling on like vultures. The worst part wasn't the humiliation. It was watching my mother nod along, adding her own gentle corrections about how I needed to find my direction and stop wasting my potential. 29 years old, and they still talked about me like I was a confused teenager. My uncle, visiting from Chicago, asked what I did for work these days. The table went quiet. I told them I worked in tech, doing consulting. My brother snorted and explained to everyone that this meant I was basically unemployed, probably doing odd jobs fixing people's computers. They all laughed. Even my girlfriend smiled a little. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror. The same face that had been on the cover of Forbes 3 months ago, though they'd never know that. The same hands that had signed a deal worth $800 million just last week. See, 5 years ago, I'd started a small software company from my garage. Nothing fancy, just solving problems I'd noticed in data management systems. I kept it quiet, used a business partner's name on all the public documents, stayed completely out of the spotlight. I'd learned early that my family's opinion of me was set in stone, and I'd gotten tired of trying to change it. The company grew. We landed our first major client, then another. I reinvested everything, lived like a broke college student, and let my family think exactly what they wanted to think. When we went public 2 years ago, I made sure my name stayed buried in the paperwork. My business partner became the public face while I remained the shadow CEO, the technical genius nobody knew about. Now we were worth $1.2 billion, and I owned 60% of it. I returned to the dinner table where my father was explaining to my girlfriend how disappointed he was that I'd never amounted to anything. He mentioned that his real estate company was struggling to land a partnership with some big tech firm for a massive development project. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was talking about my company. My brother jumped in, bragging about how his marketing firm was pitching to the same tech company. My sister mentioned her law firm was hoping to get some contract work with them too. They were all circling around my empire like sharks, completely oblivious. I asked my father about the tech company he was trying to partner with. He explained it was some data management firm that had revolutionized commercial real estate analytics. They were looking for partners to develop smart buildings across the country. The contract was worth hundreds of millions. My brother added that landing this client would set up his marketing firm for life. My sister said the same about her legal practice. They were all betting their futures on getting a piece of my company. I nodded along, asking innocent questions about their strategies, their timelines, their expectations. They were so eager to explain how they were going to finally make it big, how this one deal would change everything for them. My girlfriend asked why this company was such a big deal. My father launched into a speech about how the CEO was some mysterious genius who'd built an empire from nothing. He spoke with the kind of reverence usually reserved for discussing legends. The dinner ended with the usual disappointed looks in my direction and promises to help me network and find opportunities. My brother offered to put in a good word for me at his marketing firm, maybe get me an entry-level position. My sister suggested I could work as a paralegal at her practice. I thanked them for their generosity and drove my girlfriend home in my beat-up Honda. She was quiet for most of the ride, finally asking if I was happy with my life. I told her I was working on something big, something that would surprise everyone. She said she hoped so, because she couldn't keep defending me to her friends when they asked what her boyfriend did for a living. That night, I sat in my modest apartment and opened my laptop. I had 3 emails from my assistant about the partnership decisions we needed to make. My father's real estate company was on the list, along with my brother's marketing firm and my sister's law practice. I spent the weekend reviewing their proposals. My father's company had submitted a comprehensive plan that was actually quite good. My brother's marketing strategy was creative and well-researched. My sister's legal team had prepared thorough documentation. Under normal circumstances, I might have considered working with them. But these weren't normal circumstances. Monday morning, I called my assistant and gave her specific instructions. All 3 family businesses were to be rejected, but not immediately. I wanted them to think they were still in the running for a few more weeks. Update 1. 3 weeks later, my phone started buzzing with family calls. My father sounded stressed when he told me his company had made it to the final round of consideration for the tech partnership. He was flying to our headquarters for a presentation the next day. My brother called an hour later with the same news. Then my sister. They were all going to be in the same building tomorrow, presenting to the company I owned, still having no idea who they were really pitching to. I told my assistant to schedule all 3 presentations back to back, with mine as the final meeting of the day. I wanted to be in the room for each of their pitches. The next morning, I put on my best suit, one of 3 I owned, and drove to my company's headquarters in my Honda. I parked in the visitor section and walked through the front entrance like any other guest. My father was in the lobby, pacing nervously in his expensive suit. He looked surprised to see me and asked what I was doing there. I told him I had a job interview with a small consulting firm in the same building. He patted my shoulder and wished me luck, then returned to rehearsing his presentation under his breath. My brother arrived 20 minutes later, equally nervous. He made a joke about how we were both trying to get scraps from the same tech giant. My sister showed up just as they called my father's name for his presentation. I watched him disappear into the elevator, then took the stairs to the executive floor. My assistant met me in the hallway and briefed me on the morning's schedule. I slipped into the observation room connected to our main conference room. My father's presentation was flawless. He'd done his homework, understood our company's needs, and proposed solutions that showed real insight. For 45 minutes, he demonstrated why his real estate firm deserved this partnership. The presentation team, my employees, though he didn't know that, asked tough questions. My father handled them professionally, showing a side of himself I rarely saw at family dinners. He was competent, prepared, and genuinely passionate about the project. When it ended, he shook hands with everyone and left the room confident he'd done well. My brother's presentation was next. His marketing strategy was brilliant, incorporating social media trends and demographic analysis that impressed even me. He'd clearly spent months preparing, and his enthusiasm was infectious. My sister's legal presentation was equally impressive. She'd identified potential regulatory issues we hadn't even considered and proposed solutions that could save us millions in compliance costs. Watching them work, seeing them at their professional best, I realized something uncomfortable. They were good at what they did. Really good. Their success wasn't just family connections or luck. They'd earned their reputations. But that didn't change what they'd done to me for 29 years. Update 2. After the presentations ended, I went to my office and closed the door. My assistant brought me the evaluation reports from my team. All 3 family businesses had scored exceptionally well. Under any normal circumstances, we'd be moving forward with partnerships with all of them. I stared at the reports for an hour, thinking about my girlfriend's question from that dinner. Was I happy with my life? The truth was complicated. I'd built something incredible, achieved success beyond most people's wildest dreams. But I'd done it all in secret, hiding from my own family like some kind of corporate ghost. My phone rang. It was my father, calling to thank me for the good luck wishes. His voice was excited as he told me the presentation had gone better than expected. He thought they might actually get the contract. My brother called next, then my sister. All of them buzzing with optimism, finally seeing a path to the kind of success that would make them proud. I made my decision. The next morning, I scheduled individual meetings with each of them. Not at the office, at a neutral location. A coffee shop downtown where we could talk privately. My father arrived first, looking confused about why I'd asked to meet. I told him I had something important to discuss about his presentation yesterday. He assumed I'd heard something through my consulting contacts and leaned forward eagerly. I pulled out a folder containing his company's proposal and slid it across the table. I told him his presentation was excellent, probably the best they'd received. His face lit up with hope. Then I told him who I really was. The color drained from his face as I explained how I'd built the company from nothing, how I'd been sitting in that observation room watching him present to my employees, how I'd been listening to him talk about the mysterious CEO he admired so much. He stared at me for a long time, processing the information. Finally, he asked why I'd hidden this from the family. I reminded him of every family dinner, every disappointed look, every time he'd introduced me as his struggling son. I told him about the Forbes cover, about the billion-dollar valuation, about the deals I'd signed while he was explaining to people why I was such a disappointment. He was quiet for several minutes. When he finally spoke, he asked if this meant his company would get the contract. I told him no. Update 3. The conversation with my brother went similarly. He was shocked, then angry, then pleading. He accused me of being petty, of letting family grudges interfere with business. I reminded him of his favorite story about me dropping out of business school to play with computers. I told him those computers had generated more revenue in the past year than his marketing firm would see in a decade. My sister's reaction was the most interesting. After the initial shock, she got quiet and thoughtful. She asked if I understood the legal implications of what I was doing. Using my position to punish family members could be seen as a conflict of interest. I told her I'd already consulted with lawyers. Everything I was doing was perfectly legal. Business owners had the right to choose their partners based on any criteria they wanted, as long as it wasn't discriminatory in a protected sense. She nodded slowly, then asked the question that cut deepest. What did I want from all this? I'd expected anger, pleading, maybe even threats. I hadn't expected that simple question to hit so hard. What did I want? I wanted them to understand what they'd done to me. I wanted them to feel the weight of their assumptions, their casual cruelty, their complete dismissal of my potential. But sitting across from my sister in that coffee shop, watching her process the magnitude of what I'd accomplished and what I was choosing to do with that power, I realized something else. I wanted my family back. The revenge felt hollow now that I was actually executing it. Watching my father's face crumble when I rejected his proposal didn't bring the satisfaction I'd expected. Seeing my brother's anger turn to desperation made me feel sick. I'd spent 5 years building an empire in secret. And for what? To prove a point to people who'd already moved on from those dinner table conversations? My sister asked if there was any way to fix this, any path forward that didn't involve destroying the family relationships. I told her I needed time to think. That night, I called my girlfriend and told her everything. She listened without judgment as I explained the company, the secret, the revenge plot, all of it. When I finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said she understood why I'd hidden the truth, but she didn't understand why I was choosing to hurt people with it now. She asked if making my family suffer would actually make me feel better, or if it would just create a different kind of pain. I didn't have an answer. The next morning, I sat in my office staring at 3 rejection letters I drafted for my family's businesses. All I had to do was sign them and send them out. The revenge would be complete. Instead, I called my assistant and asked her to schedule a family dinner at my parents' house for the weekend. I told her to make sure everyone would be there, parents, siblings, even my girlfriend. It was time to stop hiding and start building something real with the success I'd achieved. The black sheep was ready to come home.